Okay. There's a couple little things I did here on the vocals that, I mean, this is kind of common, but just in case some of you guys haven't seen it, just doing stuff to like fill some of the gaps between the spaces in the vocals just felt so empty. I'll turn off this send I've got running. It just kind of stops. There's nothing there. So I'd often, in vocal stuff like this, I'd often run different types of sends off just the tail ends of the last word, just to fill out an echo or something. Or sometimes key sections like here. I think this one is just the same echo, but sometimes I'll have different speeds, like a quicker one if it's a short gap and a longer echo just to delay at the end. So if you hear this with the, play it in solo with no send. We close our eyes, we raise our hands, and now with the send. We close our eyes, we raise our hands, and when we breathe, just keeps that energy going there in the space of where the sound is sitting in the mix, like and it's like panning around and got that kind of gritty, distorted vocal sound. Like, otherwise, you feel like you're kind of missing something. And sometimes I get a little bit subtle working on spaces in headphones and stuff because I can hear it so clearly. But then if you play it in your car or in a club, I feel like you've got to really exaggerate some of the spaces on key things like vocals. Like, it's not a subtle thing. I mean, you have a subtle space to make it feel like it's sitting in the mix, but it's nice to also then throw in a big, powerful, like, yeah, we're in a big stadium right now kind of delay. And that's just running through a regular Ableton ping pong delay, which is such a useful delay. Mostly because it's got this section here where you can color it. You can choose the EQ of it, which makes so much difference for reverbs and delays. If you guys haven't tried yet, like EQing and distorting your returns after your delays and reverbs, just incredible. Just gives them a whole new life and makes them either sit and match with the original audio, or like sits them in a separate space just to like give it that extra depth and everything as well to make it sound like a really big delay. Definitely something to play around with. I wanted to show you this lead too. I want to get multiverb. Okay, yeah, okay. On these chords, I think it was on this one. I'll unfreeze this to show you this multiverb I've got here. This little guy down here is a plugin I've made. You can make these little, for anyone that doesn't use Ableton, you can make these little kind of group plugins in Ableton, which is really just that. It's grouping some plugins together, but you can put multiple channels in. And one thing I found that's really handy with them is I can do stuff with plugins that are normally just a wet effect, like sometimes a distortion or something. I can make my own dry channel and then make blends of things, something fun to play around with, and turn anything into a mixable plugin. So this one, I mean, these plugins probably, the reverbs, they did have blends, but I wanted to do something where I had a heavily processed reverb, like there's distortion on that reverb, compression, filtered up on the EQ, it's really bright, and there's a dark one that's running through guitar rig. I think that's that vintage verb. Yeah, tractor delay, bunch of stuff in there. I'll show you what they sound like. The dry signal is just this. Wet signal, the bright wet one is this. So just the sparkle. The dark one, it's got that warm, distorted kind of spring reverb kind of thing. You kind of can't get those out of one plugin, so you get that layer together, all together. And you get the sparkle, but that warm body in the other one as well. And this chews up a bit of power doing this sort of stuff, stacking them all together. So rather than running them all as live returns, it's nice to be able to build them into a little group thing like this and just freeze it, keep going. And when you've got it there, you can hit save and come over here, and I've saved it as space, reverb, distorted gate. I can use that on the next track. If I got a whole bunch of plugins over here, which saves me so much time. You can go to Audio Effect Racks. All these ones here where I've like favorite reverbs and things, spaces, percussion groups, things for vocals and leads. Wherever I've made something on a track and I went, oh, I think I did good there. That was a good reverb. I'll group them all together and save that. And then next time I just drag it straight in, you know, and often it just does the job, or it might need a couple of adjustments, and you can save it as version 2 or something, and then you've got all your own custom plugin chains there that you don't have to have a complete template then, but you can just quickly drag in things that would normally take you a long time. You can go the next step too and do like I did on the master bus if you want, and put in macros as well where it completely adjusts them too. I've got a fun vocal one for that. I'll show you quickly. That I was on another track mixing vocals, and it was having dramas trying to just pull a quick basic vocal space. There's a bunch of stuff on that. Okay, space, where is it? Vocal rack. So it's all mapped out, and I've named them just basic stuff like slap delay, dark echo, bright echo, spring, mono spring, an effects throw for like a big long send of an effect, distorted reverb, chorus, and a quarter note delay. They're just probably the 8 most common things I'd often pull up to chuck on vocals. And each one of them is in here in a little separate channel. And they also come through. And the first thing on there is a utility. So if I turn up the slap one, it's not just changing the volume of the return, it's running it like it's a send. It's saying this is how much level I'm going to run through to that channel. So all of these things here, I can automate like sends, and I can throw in little bits of slap and little bits of verb here and there, like 8 complicated sends, making a great little vocal sound, and then I can again freeze the whole thing, move on, and I've saved all my power again for my laptop, and sidechain it again too, and everything. Again, sidechaining sounds so much better if all the reverbs and everything are running through the sidechain too. They shouldn't be separate to the sidechain. Like you want those notes to be long so that they pump through there. So I'll play something with this. Bring a bit of slapping. This vocal, it's already got a lot of stuff on it, so it might be hard to hear, but some slap, dark echo, bright echo, spring mono. And a lot of these are made up of the ping pong stuff. For most delays I like a lot. For the spring stuff, again, guitar rig, they've actually got a spring reverb in there that's very good. And monos, there's something about mono spring verbs that just make stuff sit in the mix rather than letting it spread stereo. It's good to, and like I was saying, it's good to EQ and distort your reverb and delay returns. It's also good to take the stereo image and adjust pulling it in as well. Like not every reverb needs to be completely 100% stereo. Once you've constrained where you want it to be, sometimes it's also good to tilt it to certain sides that either matches with the sound, or often you can get a great sound by keeping it more dry on one side and wet on the other, and it sounds like it's throwing across. Like if you hear a sound here, this ear hears the first sound, but the other ear hears what bounces off the wall over there, so it almost sounds like it's more that way again.
Excuse me, I have a question. How do you decide the stereo position for your reverbs?
Of the sounds in general, or just the reverbs?
Yeah, you were talking about not everything has to be like super wide. So which ones do you want to pull in more towards the center? And
overall, I want the whole mix to sound wide, but in key places. Like you can't be wide all the time. This is something that does happen a little bit. My friends will send me tracks, so I get demos and stuff, and they're like, it's just like full wide all the time, and so wide that like, it just sounds like it's one thing. It's just like a big mono of nothing, you know, like there's nothing ever just sits in a separate spot. I think because people are just chucking stereo enhancers on their master bus or on everything, on every single track. It kind of doesn't work that way. I think you're better to build a space out of your mix by putting certain sounds in certain spots, and you get this overall impression rather instead of this, it is this one big thing. And you want to be able to separately distinguish with your ears like where each sound is, you know, within, I kind of like to think of it in like a 3D space, like if it's like a cube in front of you or something, and that's where all the sounds are as you're listening to it. And from bottom to top would be frequency, bass, all the way up to treble. Forwards and backwards would be things like volume, compression, distortion as well brings things forward. Reverb delay is going to push things backwards. And if you think about them in those terms, you can decide where you're going to put everything. And then pan left to right. Between all those, you can pretty much stick any sound wherever you want. That's all the tools you need. And yeah, then that's where you get that really full sound, but you can still hear everything. And I'll base it on that. I'll put the sounds first where I want them before I've even put the space on them. I'll do the panning before that. And then I'll go and apply the space and see how much, like if I got a sound here, does it need to spread out all the way to there with the reverb or something? Or should it just be there? Or should it just have its reverb on the other side so you kind of feel it? And I probably use delay a little bit more than reverb as well, I think.
There's totally a book that describes exactly how you were just explaining it, and I forget what the title is.
It might have been the one I read a book that has a lot of similar stuff in what was it? The Mix Engineer's Handbook?
No, it's a book.
Different one. There was one I read that was great called Mix Engineer's Handbook. It was one of the first ones I read where this is explained finally well. Yeah, I definitely recommend that book.
Gibson does the book that's got the 3D illustrations of all the stuff that you're talking about.
Oh, okay, cool. Awesome, yeah. Well, yeah, I think that's a good way to think about it.
I think I noticed a ride from one of your latest releases, and that's cool. And I wanted to note that and ask if you kind of reuse a lot of your kits or any of them ever, especially on kick drums and snares to avoid phase when you're mixing. Do you ever use the same kick or the same snare in different tracks?
Yeah, I do sometimes. I do use some of the same sounds, definitely some of the special effects sounds, because a lot of them took a long time to make. And some of them aren't very distinguishable, like if they're a white noise type tone, like it doesn't really stand out much in the song that it's really going to grab your ears that much that it's the same sound in the next song. Like, I mean, I could spend, I suppose, another day and make different white noise sounds for every single song, but then I'd rather just write more music. Drums, I do use some too. Yeah, rides for sure. I got a couple of rides I really like because they were really hard to find some good ones that really sit with the way I like. Other things, bigger things like kicks and snares, I change more often because they're a bit more noticeable. And if I do use the same one, it might be like pitched differently because often if it's really tonal, I'll want to tune it to the key of the track. If it's not that tonal, you know, you don't always have to tune them. Like, and you can actually pull out a lot of the tonality with a fine EQ as well. Or even things like the MPC 60 and 1200 modes on this, totally change it. And if you do that, then the two sounds don't phase anymore. It's bizarre. No worries.
Now that we're in Ableton, like I noticed you have a lot of tracks for your separate drum hits. You don't use like a single drum rack.
No, because it was done on here. So I did it all programmed here and then spat them out as separate audio files. So they would have come out as loops or extended pieces of audio. So I've, like a traditional mix down station, I've just dragged them in like their audio. Like I'll show you here. A lot of this stuff. Select that. That's all just audio.
Okay, so it's because it's been in.
Yeah, because it was
the
done on
machine.
here. Yeah, because I used this rather than if I was using drum racks, it'd probably stay. At some point, I think I'd probably render it to audio just so I can do more stuff with it. But I'd probably have it all in drum racks originally in like the folded group folder. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was that reverb thing. I wanted to show you this lead quickly too. This is because it's the one I used in that other remix as well. And this is the one where I laid it with a few different things. This guy here. It's kind of the main thing in this track. Like if you take it out, it's really just, that's all that's happening. So those basic MIDI notes there. Only a couple of notes. Kind of doing everything. I just worked on that sound I wanted just a basic melody like that, and I wanted it to just be so big and full and reverbed and sidechain that it filled up the whole spectrum. And I did it I built this little synth stack here, which is made up of Massive. On the other channel is, there's Massive there. Operator, I think. Yep, and a sample of a tom. So that's all. Then after that is running through some effects and stuff at the end here. I'll just turn these off so it gets dry. Not quite the same without that, huh? So there's massive, giving the synthy tone. Sine wavy sort of tone from operator. It just needed a little something. The best way to do this too is like you have the group effects on as you're doing it, so that when you're adjusting earlier in the chain, you hear what it's going to do to all the other stuff. So you're designing things that are going into the distortion, because then you get these kind of happy accidents. So you're like, oh, if I do this, it does that. And then the tom just gives it this this punch that I couldn't get without it. I'll take the sidechain off so you can hear. If I play this without the tom, bring the tom in, gives it that whack. And then the thing that's giving it all that crazy space again was that same reverb plugin I made with the dry, bright, wet, and dark wet reverbs as well. And you got the bright one, the dark one, and just dry. After that, it also runs through a wet and dry of a compression, where you've got a dry and the wet's running through a CLA 76 or a 1176 compressor. And this plugin, for me, doesn't have a wet and dry mix on it, so it doesn't have to stop you. You just go in and make a rack like this and make chains. To do that, you just right-click and do create chain. You can have as many as you want in there. So you can have one for dry, one for wet, and you can make parallel compression or anything for whatever you want. And it runs through a HEQ at the end. By the way, this is an amazing EQ. This is unreal. So good how you can like pinpoint exactly like a certain note by just dragging it on the keyboard and finding what you want. And then like, say if I was having a problem here at C5, then I can crank that up. I can choose the type of thing onto digital, real fine-tuned digital like that, and pull out something that's humming there. But then the rest of them, I can leave them on analog emulated style EQs like UK or US vintage things, and have subtle bands as well. And then you can save that as a preset and recall these massively complicated EQs that would normally take 6 plugins. It all happens in one. I love this thing. It's awesome.